Welcome to Big Data and Brews. Usually I ask my guests to introduce the beer and the person, but why don't you introduce your drink yourself?
Well, as a pseudo analyst, I don't like to endorse any product in particular. So this is a delicious brown cold beverage that I'm drinking.
Please introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Neil Raden. I'm the founder and principal analyst with Hired Brains Research, and very happy to be here and looking forward to having a chat with you, Stefan.
Great. What are you guys? Who's calling you, and what kind of questions do you get in the last 2 years, and how did it change over time?
Mostly they ask me why the name of my company is Hired Brains. And after they work with me, they're really confused. Enterprise clients are trying to sort out the wheat from the chaff. The noise of big data and Hadoop and what it means. IT people are pretty polarized. They either think it's a lot of crap or they can't wait to get their arms around it because it's something big to do. Mm-hmm. And what I found in companies is there is some collision of thinking about this, because the people who are the most gung-ho on open source, big data, and Hadoop are people who weren't really part of formal IT. Mm-hmm. They started in the organizations building websites and then started doing web analytics and that sort of thing. And the traditional IT people were involved with networks and security and databases. And when these two groups come together, there's often some real collision. But the problem with all of this is, and I'm talking about ordinary kinds of enterprises, not companies like Google or Yahoo or even small companies that are based on internet business or internet data, but manufacturing companies, retail companies, that kind of stuff, even healthcare. The problem is they are focused on technology. And one of the things I found very attractive about DataMirror from the beginning was the technology was sort of de-emphasized, and the ability to use it and get useful information was emphasized. There's not enough of that in this industry. If you look around this floor, a lot of people are showing you, layer cake charts with tons and tons of pieces and arrows. I call it the mythology of the arrows, meaning they don't tell you what the arrows do, but they're actually the most important part of the diagram. Right? How did you get from this module to this module to this module? Well, this is an arrow, it goes from here to here. So there's not enough concentration on, over the course of my career, I've seen this over and over again. It happened with data warehousing, that very quickly the industry and the conversation turned to databases and database optimizers and workflow management and networks and storage and security, and everybody forgot about the whole point of doing it, which was to inform people to make better decisions and do better work.
Great. Do you see in your work the different verticals adapting this new generation of technology in different speeds? Do you see healthcare moving as fast as financial services, or?
I don't know that I'm in a position to really evaluate that, because the number of organizations I work with is relatively small. I don't survey the market, so I don't know that for a fact. Mm-hmm. The only thing I do know is what I hear anecdotally. And I think that there's a huge surge of energy in healthcare, but that's only because the market is so big. In fact, it may represent a tiny fraction of healthcare. I don't know. Mm-hmm. You always hear the same. Sort of serial offenders when a new technology comes along. It's always telco, financial services, right? And depending on the application, maybe retail, but retail generally are almost the last people to adopt technology because they don't like to spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
And the reason is their margins are small.
Right.
Right?
That's their business.
That's the kind of business that they're in. So I don't know. I mean, we've all heard about the internet-based businesses and about telco, maybe about healthcare. And let's not forget about government. And then I think the biggest adopter of this technology, and probably the quietest adopter of this technology, is government, both in the U.S. and abroad, and particularly in defense and intelligence industries. Mm-hmm. That's where I've seen a lot of it.
Mm-hmm. people always running into the same mistakes, also historically with data warehousing?
I think it's a little early to talk about mistakes because most companies have adopted Hadoop, for example, have adopted it in the skunkworks, and it's in kind of the investigative stage. The ones that I've seen that have really gone full bore on it are big companies with obviously very big. But I'm working with a company right now in Singapore, and they're looking at a very interesting problem, which is reputation risk. And when you look at the parcel of technologies they need to bring to bear, real-time analytics of data from 50 to 100 different sources, from data pulls from social networks, from RSS, you name it, right? They've got to pull this stuff in and they've got to assess reputation risk on the spot. And then they have to do something with it. They have to find a way to disseminate what they've discovered in a way that the people who need to make those decisions can make those decisions. And this is a company that has 20 or 25 people. But they're using machine learning. They're using all sorts of very advanced technologies.
What do you see in your customer base being adopted from all the different stacks in the Hadoop world? Right, it's a jungle now. What is hyped, and what is kind of solid that you see are really rolling into production? Do you see Spark out yet?
I think a lot of Hadoop is getting dumbed down in the enterprise. Once it became respectable to talk about SQL has kind of taken over Hadoop. So that at the end of the day, by the time you add security and governance and profiling and masking and everything else, it doesn't look any different than what we had before, except there's a much bigger, file system down at the bottom with a lot of different kinds of data. And a lot of enterprise IT organizations are just jumping on them. They're just trying to figure out which SQL tool to use with Hadoop.
Do you lose opportunity there, you think?
I don't know yet. I think intuitively, I think the answer is yes. I never thought SQL was a good language for analytics to begin with.
I'm sorry, can you say it again? No, I'm kidding.
Look, you're talking to a guy whose first programming language was APL, right? And when somebody told me I had to use SQL to do analytics, I really thought about going to like dental school or something. I just, it was awful. But a couple of BI companies came along that were clever enough to mask optimized SQL generation behind analytics that worked pretty well. I'm talking about roll-up tools.
Right.
But I still think if those roll-up tools generated something other than SQL, it would have been even better.
Yeah.
But the problem with Hadoop is everybody who has applications now in Hadoop, if you look carefully at them, you have people writing code in Java or Python or R or something else. There are no tools. I shouldn't say there are no tools, but there aren't enough tools, and there's not enough. You and I already talked about this. Hadoop and big data, the whole focus has been on data and size and architecture and everything. But what is the point of any of that if you can't help make informed decisions? And business analysts are not going to sit here. Okay, so I can sift through 2 petabytes of data in 5 seconds, and now I'm going to spend the next day writing and tuning a SQL query.
Right.
I mean, that doesn't make any sense, right? It has to be more automatic than that. I think that Tony Baer of Ovum said something very important today. He said, until business analysts can get their hands on big data without Java or Python or R, not much is going to happen. And I agree with that 100%.
So the future is a visual front end.
Visual. I guess it would be visual.
Yeah.
I'd rather it was like, computer, can I change this price or am I going to get killed? Right? It's 2014 for God's sake.
Yeah.
Why don't we have that?
We talked to our friends.
I have a problem with visual interfaces. Sometimes visual interfaces are more complicated than writing code.
Yeah.
Depending on how they're like, okay, I'm going to press this button, and am I going to get the right answer, or am I going to launch an invasion of Crimea? Right? I mean, I don't know what's going to happen behind this button. So visual interfaces are good if they're good.
Right.
But I would really love natural language. I hope I live long enough to see that.
Sometimes it's a little sad how little enterprise software applications actually invest into user experience. Right? Like they always think, well, it's not consumer software, but they're smart enough to figure that out. And then you spend 3 months to learn another crappy product, even though you already had a crappy CRM system and a crappy HR system.
Well, it's hard, right? It's hard. I mean,
sure.
You can find fault with IT, but their job isn't easy either.
Yeah.
Right? They've got a budget this big, and they think they need a budget this big, and they've come through. Look, if you look at a person in IT who's been in IT for more than 10 or 15 years, they come from a mindset and a methodology and a way of doing things I call managing from scarcity. Mm-hmm. Meaning, we never have enough money, we never have enough CPU, we never have enough memory. We have to find the easiest way to do things. So we've got a date field here. Let's just lop off the first two characters.
Right. That's good enough.
Yeah. That's good enough.
Two months later.
Right. And then
we really need that.
And now you have the Hadoop Big Data crowd, and these are the guys. I used to call them the ponytail guys, but now I call them the hoodie guys.
Yeah.
And they're off building websites and doing web analytics and messing around with stuff. And they're not working from managing from scarcity. They're working with, I can do anything, just leave me alone and I'll go do it. Right. Well, that isn't IT. IT is not about, leave me alone, I can do it. Right? IT is all about control and controlled release and security and reliability and everything else. And those two cultures are going to clash.
Yeah.
But it would seem that what Merv referred to as traditional Hadoop, meaning Hadoop, what was it before it was 2? It was 0 point something or other, right?
0.23.
Yeah, 0.23. 0.23 is going to exist in a million places. There are going to be clusters running 0.23 with a few guys writing programs and crunching stuff. But what we're going to be seeing in the enterprise is going to be something else. It's just going to have the same name. It's going to be called Hadoop. And there's going to be the Hadoop distributed file system down below. And even MapReduce is going to disappear. It's all going to disappear.
Yeah.
Hopefully Hive will disappear sooner or later. But you've got Spark, you've got Tez, and Stinger, and all of these other things coming along. So there's all these pieces that are being called Hadoop that are just very, very different. And they're going to be more palatable to enterprise IT because they look more like enterprise software.
Do you buy in that Hadoop is more kind of a virtualization platform, it virtualized storage, compute, and memory, and now we have different engines to run on it?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure.
So the idea would be VMware as a vertical virtualization had one physical machine and many virtual machines on top of that. Mm-hmm. And Hadoop is the upside down. You have one virtual machine, right? Virtual hard drive, virtual CPU, maybe virtual memory with, Storm or whatever, and many physical machines under it. And then that's why the hoodie crowd is saying, I don't care about storage and compute anymore. I just do it. Mm-hmm. I just rent 5 more machines on Amazon.
Well, here's a question I have. The opposite of managing from scarcity. Mm-hmm. It's not managing from scarcity. But when do you reach the point of diminishing returns?
Yeah.
When does somebody say, okay, so we solved a problem with 10,000 cores.
Yeah.
And now that I look at the utilization, we're only utilizing 20% of them.
That would be Facebook. Well, that's what they did.
Yeah.
They built a $100 billion company with PHP.
Yeah.
And they actually, what was it, a year before or 2 years before they IPO'd, with tens of millions of dollars of revenue, wrote a PHP to C++ compiler to improve the utilization of their hardware. Yeah. What I thought was interesting.
Well, there you go. So the point is, here's my concept of Hadoop. Buy as many cheap blades as you can find and solve the problem that way, and who cares what the utilization is because the whole thing was cheap. Right. Compared to a proprietary relational database, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
When does somebody take a look at that? When did the bean counters look at that and say, well, we have 10,000 cores, why can't we solve this problem with 5,000 cores?
Right.
And when do we eventually get Hadoop back to where we are now, where
Yeah.
everything becomes optimized, instead of the forget about how many you have or how much it costs.
So one thing that I observed found really interesting in that context is, what do you value, optimization or innovation? Right? So the hoodie crowd, and it doesn't matter, is really where there's high innovation pressure. And we
Right.
even see that with banks, right?
Right.
Where they say, you know what, it doesn't matter, is when they're like, holy moly, we have a virtual currency and we never thought about that.
Right.
How fast can we get involved there?
Right.
And then the dollars just flow as you have innovation pressure.
Right.
But in the moment you have, like in retail, you have very little margins, then you come in and then you optimize where you spend. Right? So that's kind of what I saw with like different organizations. The innovation pressure in some of those organizations overcome the bean counters that you mentioned.
Well, yeah, I think what you're talking about is on an individual organization. I'm just saying in general that there's this euphoria with Hadoop that you can put together clusters as big as you like because they're so cheap.
Yeah.
But sooner or later, somebody's going to say, does that really make sense?
Yeah.
Could we have just maybe half as many, right? So what we know as Hadoop, the original Hadoop, is going to disappear over time.
It's a brand, really. It's not a technology.
Yeah, in the enterprise, for sure. So the interesting question is, in science and in government, in NGOs and nonprofits and so forth that have analytical problems to solve, how significant is that? Because if you go to a nonprofit organization, for example, that has maybe $50 million in, what do they call it? They'll call it revenue. They call it contributions or something like that. And they try to put together a database, and they go to Oracle and find out it's going to cost them $1 million a year in Oracle licenses. And they just flip out. And is the same thing going to happen to Hadoop? Something that was once very inexpensive to put together, as it becomes more enterprise, will become the price. I mean, how can these companies survive on selling software at 10 to 20%, the cost of enterprise software?
Got a lot of VC money. billion dollars VC money, no problem to us, right?
Yeah.
Twice as much customer acquisition cost as your first year ASP.
Yeah.
With $1 billion in cash.
Yep.
Why not?
Yep.
Will be very interesting though to see how that shakes out.
Yeah.
I talked to a lady from Wall Street Journal earlier, and she I really don't understand how these open source companies want to make business in the future. That was interesting. Great. So, what do you think? What happens in the next year when you come to the next Hadoop Summit? So, prediction: 1 year out, 3 years out.
I'm fairly sure the Phillies are going to trade away Cliff Lee.
Yeah.
That's about as much as I know. Get rid of that huge payroll. And I don't know. I mean, I would have never predicted what I'm seeing here today a year ago. I guess I've never been real good on prediction like that. I guess the trend I see is that you're right, that Hadoop has become a brand. An open source product has become a huge brand. It's crazy, isn't it? And it's going to become more and more enterprise because companies probably find it's easier to sell software to enterprise IT than it is somewhere else, right? Whether all these small companies will be here next year, I don't know. I was talking to a venture capitalist today, and he said his company hasn't made a single investment in any Hadoop-related company yet, because the founder of the company, who happens to be an extremely famous person, venture capitalist, says he doesn't believe in Hadoop. I just wrote an article called "I'm finally starting to get used to Hadoop, sort of." But at my age, I have the right to take my time to get used to things. I just found it funny that last year everybody in the Hadoop market was talking about NoSQL and about a schema on read and so forth. And they came and they displayed their new product, and they were showing me their lightning fast queries on Hive based on the star schema. I said, wait a minute,
I saw that before, like
Yeah,
20 plus years ago.
yeah, you guys have done a 180 on this, right? So I don't know. I don't know who drives this market. Maybe you have a better idea than I do, but I think the legacy analysts have a lot to do with driving this market, like Gartner, Forrester, Ovum IDC, and I think they were tentative about Hadoop for a while. They love to talk about big data, but they were tentative about endorsing Hadoop, which was an open source product. They're all Hadooped up now.
Yeah.
So that makes
Hadooped up. I will quote you on that.
I spent many years running my own systems integration business, and many times we would get the trust of our clients to do things for them, and we would come in and some IT person said, "Yeah, but I just had a call with Gartner and they said that's not true." So they have so much influence.
Yeah.
So I guess they have something to, but when I saw a couple of things Gartner has said recently, it's all been pretty high level. They haven't gotten down to detail. And you and I have talked about this before. The thing that I find maddening is nobody talks about solutions. Nobody talks about decisions.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about doing things that help people make up their mind about what to do and to be better informed.
Yeah.
They love to talk about how much data there is, right?
Right.
Query
Query optimization.
But there's a problem with too much data. Too much data can obscure the truth. Too much data can make you overconfident. Too much data can make you overcalibrated. So you have to be able to work with. I said to somebody just the other day. I said, good models trump good algorithms.
Yeah.
All the algorithms in the world are no good if you don't have a good model to build around them. And nobody talks about modeling. I've had this conversation with the big Hadoop vendors, and I said, I haven't heard you speak the word model yet. So you tell me, what is a day in the life of somebody who works with this software like? If they can't build models, and they know how to build models, and they know how to test them and continuously improve them, you got nothing.
Yeah.
So that's what I like about your product. You came at me with, here we are at the other end. We're not going to talk about the layer cake.
Optimization.
Yeah,
we do have a layer cake.
I know you do, but I don't care about it, right? Because you're saying here's data. I'm getting to manipulate this data right here in a way I can look at. I think that's fabulous. I think that's great.
Thank you. Well, thanks for joining, and then maybe next time we can have a beer together.
Okay.
Enjoy the show.
Later today.
Yeah.
All right.